The millionaire thought he had buried his past until he walked into his wedding venue and came face to face with the black woman he had betrayed 4 years ago. Maya Brooks, now his wedding planner, stood there with professional composure, but her eyes held secrets that could destroy everything he'd built. What Ethan Vale didn't know was that his bride-to-be had orchestrated this reunion deliberately, hiring the one woman who knew his darkest shame. As the storm clouds gathered over their coastal wedding venue, 3 hearts collided in a web of lies, revenge, and a love that refused to die. But when the truth finally explodes, which woman will walk away with the man who broke them both? If you believe in second chances and poetic justice, hit subscribe and tell me, have you ever had to face someone from your past at the worst possible moment? The morning sun painted golden streaks across the harbor as Ethan Vale's black sedan wound up the coastal road towards Seabrook Inn. His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than they should have for such a peaceful drive. In 3 days, he would marry Lila Hart in what the local papers had already called the wedding of the season. Everything was perfect. Everything was planned down to the last detail. So why did his stomach feel like it was tied in knots? "Stop overthinking," he muttered to himself, the same words his older brother Daniel had said over coffee that morning. "It's just wedding nerves. Everyone gets them." The inn came into view, a grand Victorian mansion perched on the bluffs, its wraparound porches and turret windows overlooking the Atlantic. Luxury cars dotted the circular drive. Staff members in crisp white shirts hustled between delivery trucks, their arms full of flowers, linens, and silver serving pieces. This was it, the final walkthrough before the biggest day of his life. Ethan parked and took a deep breath. The salt air filled his lungs, but it didn't calm him the way it usually did. He pulled out his phone to check the time. 9 a.m. sharp, just like Lila had insisted. She valued punctuality above almost everything else. The inn's front door opened with a gentle chime. Inside, the lobby buzzed with controlled energy. A woman with silver hair and kind eyes approached him with a clipboard. "Mr. Vale, I'm Carmen Ruiz, the venue owner. Welcome to Seabrook Inn. Thank you. This place is even more beautiful than in the photos." Carmen smiled. "We're honored to host your celebration. Your wedding planner should be finishing up with the florist in the East Wing. Shall I take you to her?" Ethan nodded and followed Carmen down a hallway lined with antique photographs of the inn through the decades. The sound of voices grew louder as they approached an open doorway. "The ceremony arch needs to be 3 inches to the left," a woman's voice said, clear and confident. "The afternoon light hits differently than morning light. Trust me on this." Something about that voice made Ethan's steps slow. It was familiar in a way that made his chest tighten. Carmen gestured for him to enter the room. "Maya, I'd like you to meet." Ethan stepped through the doorway and froze. Maya Brooks stood with her back to him, her dark hair pulled into a neat bun, a tablet in one hand and a measuring tape in the other. She wore a simple navy dress and comfortable flats, practical but elegant. When she turned around, their eyes met across the flower-filled room. Time seemed to stop. Maya's warm brown eyes went wide for just a split second before she composed herself. Her expression became professional, neutral, but Ethan saw the way her grip tightened on the tablet, the way her shoulders straightened. "Mr. Vale," she said, her voice steady. "Welcome. I'm Maya Brooks, your lead wedding planner." The florist, a cheerful woman arranging white roses, looked between them with curious eyes. Carmen seemed to sense the sudden tension but said nothing. Ethan found his voice. "Maya, I didn't know you worked here. I work with several venues along the coast." Maya's tone remained professional, but there was steel underneath. "Shall we review the ceremony setup?" She gestured toward the large windows overlooking the garden, where white chairs sat in perfect rows, facing an ornate arch. Beyond them, the ocean stretched to the horizon, dotted with sailboats. "Everything looks perfect," Ethan managed. "We aim for excellence." Maya consulted her tablet. "The ceremony begins at 4 p.m. Cocktail hour on the terrace from 5 to 6. Dinner and dancing in the main ballroom until 10 p.m. Weather forecast shows possible rain Tuesday and Wednesday, but the weekend looks clear." Her words were crisp, efficient. She could have been discussing any wedding with any client, but Ethan knew her too well. He could see the hurt she was working so hard to hide. It had been 4 years since he'd seen her. 4 years since he'd made the worst mistake of his life. "Maya," he started, then stopped when she held up a hand. "I have a tight schedule today, Mr. Vale. The photographer arrives at 10 for venue shots. Your fiancé requested changes to the centerpieces that need approval, and we're expecting a delivery of specialty linens any moment." "Of course, I understand." Ethan's throat felt dry. "Could I just have a quick word, privately?" Maya's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I prefer to keep all wedding discussions with the full planning team present. It ensures nothing gets missed." Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed. Lila's name flashed on the screen. "Ethan, darling." Lila's voice filled the room as he answered. She always spoke loudly on speakerphone, as if the whole world needed to hear her conversations. "I'm at the salon, but I wanted to check on the escort card display. I've decided we need something more glamorous. Maybe crystal stands instead of the wooden ones?" Maya stepped forward smoothly. "Miss Hart, this is Maya Brooks, your wedding planner. Crystal stands are certainly possible. I can have samples here within the hour for your review." "Perfect. You're so efficient, Maya." "No wonder everyone raves about your work." Ethan frowned. The way Lila said Maya's name, like she'd known it before today. "I'll have everything ready for your arrival," Maya said. "What time should we expect you?" "Noon should work." "Ethan, sweetheart, make sure you approve whatever I choose. You know how important the details are to me." "Of course," Ethan said, though his attention was focused on Maya. She was writing notes on her tablet, her expression carefully blank. After Lila hung up, the room fell silent, except for the rustle of the florist arranging stems. "I'll get those samples ordered," Maya said, already moving toward the door. "Carmen, could you show Mr. Vale the ballroom while I make calls?" "Maya, wait." Ethan took a step toward her. She paused but didn't turn around. "Is there something specific about the wedding? Arrangements you need to discuss?" The formality in her voice cut deeper than any angry words could have. This was Maya sweet, warm Maya who used to laugh at his terrible jokes and fall asleep in his arms watching old movies. Maya who'd believed in him when no one else did. Maya whose heart he'd broken completely. "No," he said quietly. "Nothing about the arrangements." "Then I'll see you when your fiancé arrives." She walked out, her footsteps quiet but quick on the hardwood floors. Carmen cleared her throat delicately. "The ballroom is this way, Mr. Vale." Ethan followed her in a daze, barely hearing her explanations about table settings and the sound system. His mind was spinning. Maya was his wedding planner. Maya, the woman he'd betrayed, the woman who'd trusted him with her whole heart until he'd thrown it away for a moment of weakness that had lasted 3 months. How was this possible? Had Lila known? The way she'd said Maya's name suggested she had. In the ballroom, Daniel appeared with 2 cups of coffee and his usual easy smile. "There you are. How's it looking?" "Good. Fine." Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully. "Daniel, I need to ask you something." "Shoot." "Did Lila ever mention knowing our wedding planner?" Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You mean Maya?" "Yeah. She mentioned it a few weeks ago. Said she'd heard great things about her work." "Why?" Ethan's coffee suddenly tasted bitter. "What exactly did she say?" "Just that she'd done some research, and Maya Brooks was the best planner on the coast." "Very professional, very discreet." Daniel studied his brother's face. "Why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "Because I have." Ethan set down his cup with shaking hands. "Daniel, Maya is. She's Maya, my Maya. From college." Daniel's easy expression disappeared. "The Maya? The one you?" "Yes." "Oh, hell." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Does Lila know?" "I'm starting to think she does." They stood in silence, watching the staff set up round. Tables with crisp white linens. Everything was elegant, perfect, expensive. Exactly what Lila wanted. But all Ethan could think about was Maya's controlled composure, the way she'd built walls around herself the moment she'd seen him. "What are you going to do?" Daniel asked. "I don't know." Ethan's voice was barely a whisper. "I never thought I'd see her again. I thought she'd moved away, started fresh somewhere else. Maybe she did. Maybe she came back. Maybe." Ethan watched a staff member adjust the position of a centerpiece by exactly half an inch. Maya had always been detail-oriented, but never obsessive. Now she seemed to use precision like armor. "Ethan," Daniel's voice was serious. "You need to be careful here. You're getting married in 3 days. To someone else. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I know that. The words came out sharper than Ethan intended. I'm not stupid, Daniel. I didn't say you were, but I know you. I know how much you regretted what happened with Maya, and I know you've never really gotten over it. Ethan wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come, because Daniel was right. 4 years later, and he still woke up sometimes thinking about Maya's smile, the way she hummed when she cooked, the way she believed in people's best selves even when they let her down, especially when they let her down. A young man with curly hair and an earnest expression approached them. "Excuse me, Mr. Vale, I'm Leo, part of the planning team. Maya asked me to go over the timeline with you." "Of course." Leo pulled out a detailed schedule. "Monday we'll do the rehearsal and rehearsal dinner. Tuesday is vendor setup day, flowers, decorations, final touches. Wednesday is the ceremony and reception. Maya has everything mapped out to the minute." As Leo talked, Ethan found himself watching for Maya through the ballroom's French doors. He could see her on the terrace, phone pressed to her ear, one hand gesturing as she spoke. Even from a distance, he could read the tension in her posture. "Sir?" Leo was looking at him expectantly. "Sorry, what was the question?" "The seating arrangements. Your fiancé wanted to review them one more time before we finalize the place cards." "Right, yes, that's fine." Leo made a note. "Maya will have everything ready for when Miss Hart arrives. She's really great at managing all the moving pieces." "I'm sure she is." Ethan's voice was quiet. Maya had always been capable, organized, reliable. The kind of person who remembered birthdays and kept emergency snacks in her purse and made sure everyone felt included. The kind of person who deserved better than what he'd given her. "All right, I think that covers everything for now," Leo said. "Maya wanted me to let you know that we'll be out of your way by 10:30. She knows you and Miss Hart will want some private time to review everything." Private time. As if privacy was what Lila wanted, as if this whole elaborate wedding wasn't designed to be seen, photographed, and talked about for months. After Leo left, Ethan and Daniel stood alone in the ballroom. "You could ask for a different planner," Daniel suggested quietly. "And ruin her biggest contract of the year?" "No." Ethan shook his head. "Maya's worked too hard to build her business for me to mess it up now." "Then what?" "Then I keep my mouth shut and let her do her job." But even as he said it, Ethan knew it wouldn't be that simple, because Maya had always been able to see right through him, and because, despite everything, despite the fact that he was marrying someone else in 3 days, being in the same room with her again felt like coming home, which was exactly the problem. Through the window, he watched Maya end her phone call and check something on her tablet. She looked professional, successful, confident. She looked like she'd built a good life for herself without him. So why did he have the feeling that everything was about to fall apart? Carmen appeared, at his elbow. "Mr. Vale, your fiancée just pulled up. Should I bring her to the ballroom?" Ethan straightened his shoulders and tried to push thoughts of Maya aside. "Yes, please. Thank you." But as he prepared to meet Lila, to smile and nod and approve whatever crystal escort card displays she'd chosen, one thought echoed in his mind. Maya deserved the truth 4 years ago. She deserved an apology. She deserved to know that leaving her had been the worst mistake of his life. She deserved a lot of things. The question was whether he was brave enough to give them to her. Lila Hart swept into the ballroom like she owned it, which, given what she was paying for the weekend, wasn't far from the truth. Her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves. Her designer dress fit like it had been sewn directly onto her body, and her smile was camera-ready even though no photographers were present. "Darling." She kissed Ethan's cheek, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume. "This place is even more stunning than I remembered. We're going to get the most incredible photos." "It's beautiful," Ethan agreed, though his attention kept drifting toward the terrace where Maya was directing the setup of cocktail tables. "Where's our planner? I'm dying to see those crystal options." "She'll be right in," Carmen said. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water?" "Sparkling water would be divine, thank you." As Carmen left, Lila moved to the windows and began pointing out spots for photos. "We absolutely must get some shots by that fountain, and the rose garden is perfect for the bridal party portraits. Oh, and Daniel, you'll need to make sure your tie is perfectly straight." The photographer will catch every detail. Daniel nodded politely, but Ethan could see the slight eye roll his brother tried to hide. Miss Hart? Maya appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray with several crystal card holders that caught the light like diamonds. I have those samples you requested. Maya, perfect. Timing. Lila's smile seemed brighter than necessary. Let me see what you've found. Maya set the tray on a nearby table and began explaining the options. Her voice was calm, professional, completely different from the warm laugh Ethan remembered. These are Austrian crystal, these are Venetian glass, and these are vintage-inspired reproductions. All would work beautifully with your color scheme. Lila examined each option with the seriousness of someone choosing state secrets. They're all lovely, but I'm drawn to the Austrian crystal. More elegant, don't you think? Very. Refined. Excellent choice, Maya said, making a note on her tablet. I'll have them delivered this afternoon. Wonderful. You know, Maya, when I was researching wedding planners, your name came up again and again. Everyone said you were the absolute best. Maya's fingers tightened slightly on her tablet, but her expression remained neutral. I appreciate that. In fact, Lila continued, her voice taking on a casual tone that didn't fool Ethan for a second, I specifically requested you because I'd heard such wonderful things. Word travels fast in certain circles. Ethan felt his stomach drop. There it was confirmation that Lila had known exactly who Maya was when she'd hired her. But why? What was she trying to prove? Word of mouth is crucial in my business, Maya replied carefully. I'm grateful for client referrals. Of course. And I'm sure you've worked with all sorts of couples. Some probably even have. Interesting histories. The room went very quiet. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Carmen, who had just returned with the sparkling water, seemed to sense the tension and stayed near the door. Maya's voice remained steady, but Ethan could hear the steel underneath. I don't discuss my clients' personal lives, Miss Hart. Discretion is part of professional service. Oh, I'm not asking you to gossip, Lila laughed, the sound like breaking glass. I just meant that you must see all kinds of situations. People are so complicated, aren't they? Past relationships, old feelings. It can make things messy. Maya met Lila's gaze directly. I focus on creating beautiful events, not analyzing personal histories. Your wedding is going to be exactly what you've envisioned. I'm sure it will be. Lila's smile never wavered. You seem like someone who keeps things very professional. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Ethan wanted to step in, to say something, but he could see Maya didn't need his protection. She was handling Lila with calm efficiency. Always, Maya said simply. Carmen cleared her throat. Miss Hart, your sparkling water, and I believe the photographer will be here shortly for the venue shots. Perfect. Lila accepted the glass and took a delicate sip. Maya, I assume you'll be coordinating with the photographer? I want to make sure she gets all the right angles. Of course. I have a shot list prepared based on your preferences. Excellent. You really are thorough. Lila's eyes glittered. I can see why you have such a good reputation. As Maya excused herself to prepare for the photographer's arrival, Ethan caught her eye for just a moment. In that brief glance, he saw something that made his chest ache: resignation. Maya had dealt with difficult clients before. She was treating this like just another professional challenge, but it wasn't. And they both knew it. I love how organized she is, Lila said after Maya left. So controlled, so careful. That's exactly what we need for an event of this magnitude. Ethan finally found his voice. Lila, did you know Maya and I had history when you hired her? Lila tilted her head, her expression perfectly innocent. Did you? How interesting. What kind of history? We dated in college. Oh, how sweet. College relationships are so youthful, aren't they? All that intensity over things that seem so small later. She sipped her water again. I'm sure she's completely moved on. Professional women like Maya don't dwell on the past. Daniel was staring at Lila like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. Ethan felt like he was seeing her clearly too, and he didn't like what he was discovering. Why didn't you tell me you knew about Maya? He asked. Because it doesn't matter, darling. Does it? Lila's voice was light, but there was something sharp underneath. We're getting married. She's our wedding planner. Ancient history is just that history, but you specifically requested her. I requested the best planner available. The fact that you two have a past is just coincidence. Lila moved closer to him, placing a manicured hand on his chest. Ethan, you're not having second thoughts, are you? About us? The question felt like a trap. In the context of their relationship, any hesitation would be seen as betrayal. Lila expected absolute certainty, absolute commitment. She'd made that clear from the beginning. Of course not, he said, automatically. Good, her smile returned to full brightness. Because this is going to be the perfect wedding. Everyone will be talking about it for years. Everyone will be talking about it, not about them, not about their love, but about the event itself. The spectacle. Ethan had known this was important to Lila, but hearing it stated so boldly made him uncomfortable. The photographer arrived, then an energetic woman named Renee with kind eyes and efficient movements. She immediately began discussing lighting and angles with Maya, who had returned with a detailed timeline. The golden hour shots will be perfect around 6 p.m., Maya was saying. The light hits the garden beautifully then, and we'll have time before cocktails begin. Sounds perfect, Renee agreed. And for the ceremony itself, I'll want to position myself here for the processional. As the women discussed details, Lila began describing her vision for the photos. Every word was about image, about how things would look, about creating the perfect pictures for social media and society pages. Ethan found himself watching Maya instead. She listened carefully to every request, made thoughtful suggestions, smoothly managed the logistics. She was good at this, really good. She'd always been good at bringing people together, at making things work. Mr. Vale? Maya was looking at him. Did you have any specific photo requests? He realized he'd been staring at her for too long. No, I trust your judgment. Something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or pain. In college, he'd always trusted her judgment. She'd been his anchor, his voice of reason when he got overwhelmed by family pressure or academic stress. We should get some shots of the happy couple, Renee suggested. The lighting is beautiful right now. Of course. Lila immediately moved to Ethan's side, sliding her arm through his. Where should we start? As Renee positioned them by the windows overlooking the ocean, Ethan tried to focus on Lila, on the camera, on playing the part of the eager groom. But his attention kept drifting to Maya, who was quietly coordinating with other staff members, making sure everything ran smoothly. Ethan, darling, you look distracted, Lila murmured during a lighting adjustment. What's wrong? Nothing, just thinking about work stuff. Well, stop thinking about work. This is about us. She squeezed his arm. Our perfect day. Their perfect day. As Renee snapped photos and Lila smiled radiantly beside him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that perfection was exactly the problem, because perfect didn't leave room for real emotions. Perfect didn't leave room for second thoughts or difficult conversations or honest apologies. Perfect was a performance, and he was tired of performing, especially in front of Maya, who had always been able to see through his performances to the real person underneath. After the photo session, Daniel pulled him aside, while Lila reviewed the shots with Renee. We need to talk, Daniel said quietly. Outside. They walked onto the terrace, where the afternoon breeze carried the scent of salt and roses. Below them, Maya was directing staff members as they arranged tables for an outdoor cocktail setup. She moved with quiet confidence, solving problems before they became crises. What the hell was that in there? Daniel asked. What do you mean? Lila knew exactly who Maya was when she hired her. She practically admitted it. Ethan leaned against the stone railing. I know. And that doesn't bother you. Of course it bothers me. Ethan's voice was strained. But what am I supposed to do about it? Call off the wedding because my fiancé hired my ex-girlfriend as our wedding planner? Maybe, if you think she did it to mess with Maya, or to mess with you. The possibility had occurred to Ethan, but he didn't want to believe it. Lila could be controlling, demanding, focused on image but deliberately cruel. That was harder to accept. Maybe she just wanted the best planner available, he said weakly. Daniel gave him a look. You don't believe that. Ethan didn't answer because his brother was right. But admitting that meant admitting something much bigger, that maybe he was marrying the wrong person for all the wrong reasons. What do you want me to do, Daniel? It's 3 days before the wedding. Vendors are hired, Guests have traveled, deposits are paid. Those are logistics. I'm talking about your life. Below them, Maya was showing a staff member how to fold napkins in an intricate pattern. Even from a distance, Ethan could see her patience, her attention to detail. She'd always been like that, careful with things that mattered. She looks good, he said quietly. Maya, she looks successful, happy. Does she? Does she? Ethan looked more carefully. Maya was professional, efficient, in control. But happy? He remembered what happy looked like on Maya, the way her whole face lit up when she laughed, the way she hummed unconsciously when she was content. This Maya was composed, guarded. This Maya had learned to protect herself. I hurt her, he said, the words barely audible. Yeah, you did. I hurt her badly. Yeah. And now she has to spend the weekend planning my wedding to someone else. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. What can I do? Apologize and make it worse? Ask her to forgive me so I can feel better about myself? That wouldn't be fair to her. So, you're just going to pretend you don't know each other? If that's what she wants. But even as he said it, Ethan knew it wouldn't work. The tension in that ballroom had been thick enough to cut with a knife. Lila had felt it. Daniel had felt it. Probably everyone had felt it. And Maya was good at her job, but she wasn't a robot. Being around him had to be affecting her, even if she was hiding it well. I should talk to her, he said suddenly. Ethan, not to ask for anything, just to acknowledge what happened, to let her know I understand how hard this must be. Daniel studied his brother's face. And what if talking to her makes you realize you're making a mistake? The question hung between them like a challenge, because that was the real fear, wasn't it? Not that Maya wouldn't forgive him, but that she would. Not that he couldn't have her back, but that he'd realize he wanted her back more than anything else in the world. I'm marrying Lila in 3 days, Ethan said firmly. That's not an answer. Before Ethan could respond, Lila's voice called from inside. Ethan, come see these gorgeous photos. He took a deep breath and headed back toward the ballroom, toward his fiancée and their perfect wedding plans. But as he walked away from the terrace, he couldn't stop thinking about Maya, about the way she'd looked at him that morning, about the conversation they still needed to have, about the apology he'd been carrying in his heart for 4 long years. Some conversations couldn't be avoided forever, even if having them might change everything. The storm arrived Tuesday evening like an uninvited guest, rattling the windows of Seabrook Inn with sheets of rain and gusts that sent loose flowers skittering across the terrace. Maya stood in the main hallway, radio in hand, coordinating with her team as they moved centerpieces and equipment away from the windows. Leo, get those programs into the office. Carmen, can we move the gift table away from that window? Her voice remained calm despite the chaos outside. This is exactly why we planned for weather contingencies. Ethan watched from the doorway, impressed, despite everything, by how smoothly Maya managed the crisis. She had backup plans for the backup plans, and her team responded to her quiet authority without question. The ceremony arch is secure, reported a staff member with rain dripping from his jacket. We moved it to the covered pavilion like you suggested. Perfect. What about the sound equipment? All protected and tested. We're ready to go as soon as this blows over. Maya made notes on her tablet, water-resistant case protecting it from the occasional drops that made it inside. Weather service says this should pass by tomorrow afternoon. We'll have time to reset everything before the rehearsal. Lila, who had been pacing nervously by the windows, finally spoke up. But what if it doesn't stop? What if it's still raining tomorrow? Then we use the indoor ceremony setup, Maya said patiently. I showed you the photos yesterday, remember? The ballroom looks beautiful with the archway positioned by the fireplace. But I wanted the ocean view. All my photos were planned around the ocean view. Maya's expression didn't change, but Ethan caught the slight tightening around her eyes. Renee has already scouted indoor shots that will be just as stunning. The light in the ballroom during the afternoon is actually quite dramatic. It's not the same, Lila muttered. No, Maya agreed. It's different, but it can still be beautiful. There was something in the way she said it, gentle but firm, that reminded Ethan of how Maya used to handle his anxiety attacks in college. She never dismissed his fears, but she didn't let him spiral either. She helped him see alternatives, possibilities he couldn't imagine when panic clouded his vision. Thunder cracked overhead, making everyone jump except Maya, who simply checked her watch. "The worst of it should pass in the next hour," she said. "Leo, why don't you show Miss Hart the updated indoor timeline? I want to check on the kitchen staff." As Maya headed down the hallway, Ethan found himself following her. He told himself it was just to help, but the truth was more complicated. Being around Maya felt like being around the person he used to be, or maybe the person he was supposed to become. "Maya," he caught up with her near the kitchen entrance. "Do you need any help?" She paused, seeming surprised by the offer. "I have everything under control, thank you." "I know you do. You always did." The words slipped out before he could stop them. Maya's expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "Mr. Vale, Ethan, please." "Ethan," she corrected, though his name sounded careful in her mouth. "I really do need to check on the catering staff." "Of course, He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling like the awkward college student he'd once been. "I wanted to say I'm sorry, about the storm, about the complications. I know this isn't how you planned the week." Maya studied his face for a long moment. Outside, the wind howled around the building's corners. "Storms happen," she said finally. "That's why we plan for them." It was a simple statement, but Ethan heard the deeper meaning underneath. Life was unpredictable. People disappointed you. The key was being prepared, being strong enough to handle whatever came. "Maya, the kitchen staff is waiting," she interrupted gently but firmly. "Excuse me." She disappeared through the swinging doors, leaving Ethan alone in the hallway with the sound of rain and his own frustrated breathing. In the kitchen, Maya found the catering team huddled around steaming cups of coffee, waiting for the storm to pass so they could finish setting up the outdoor serving stations. "How are we doing in here?" she asked, grateful for the distraction of work. "Good, good," said Chef Rodriguez, the head caterer. "The appetizers for tomorrow's rehearsal are prepped. The wedding cake is secured. We might need to adjust the cocktail service if we're moving everything indoors, but nothing we can't handle." Maya made notes, but her mind kept drifting to the conversation in the hallway. Ethan had looked genuinely concerned about her, genuinely sorry for the complications. It was the same expression he used to wear when he felt responsible for things beyond his control. "Don't," she warned herself. "Don't read into it. Don't let old feelings cloud your judgment," because that was how she'd gotten hurt the first time. She'd believed that Ethan's kindness meant more than it did. She'd trusted that his attention was exclusive, that his promises were real. Until she'd found out about Jessica, the memory hit her with surprising force. Walking into that campus coffee shop 4 years ago, expecting to surprise Ethan with his favorite pastry before his morning class. Instead, she'd seen him in a corner booth with Jessica Chen, their heads bent together, his hand covering hers on the table. Maya had stood frozen by the entrance, holding a blueberry scone that suddenly felt heavy as a brick. She'd watched Ethan lean across the table to whisper something in Jessica's ear. Watched Jessica laugh and brush a strand of hair from his forehead, the same gesture Maya had made 100 times. She'd left without saying anything, without confronting them, without making a scene. She'd simply walked out and waited for Ethan to tell her the truth. He never did. For 2 weeks, she'd waited for him to explain the late-night study sessions, the weekend plans that suddenly didn't include her, the way his phone buzzed with messages he wouldn't read in front of her. For 2 weeks, she'd given him chances to be honest. Instead, he'd lied. Small lies, casual lies, lies that came so easily, Maya wondered how long he'd been practicing them. The truth had finally come out when Jessica herself had approached Maya at the library. "I think we should talk," she'd said, her face pale but determined. "About Ethan." Even then, even hearing the details of their 3-month relationship from Jessica's own lips, Maya had waited for Ethan to explain, to apologize, to fight for what they'd had. But Ethan had just stood there in her dorm room, looking guilty and miserable and sorry, saying all the right words about how he'd made a mistake, how it didn't mean anything, how he wanted to make it right. If it didn't mean anything, Maya had asked, why did you do it for 3 months? He'd had no answer for that. "Miss Brooks?" Chef Rodriguez was looking at her with concern. "Are you all right?" Maya realized she'd been staring at her tablet without seeing it, lost in memories that had no place in her professional life. I'm fine. Just thinking about tomorrow's timeline. She forced herself to focus. What time do you need access to the outdoor grills? As they discussed logistics, Maya heard familiar voices in the hallway, Ethan and Daniel talking quietly. She couldn't make out words, but she recognized the concerned tone Daniel was using. He'd always been protective of his younger brother, sometimes to a fault. Maya had liked Daniel in college. He'd been kind to her, included her in family dinners when she couldn't afford to go home for holidays. After everything fell apart with Ethan, Daniel had actually called her to apologize not for his brother, but for his own failure to see what was happening. I should have noticed, he'd said. I should have said something. It wasn't your responsibility, Maya had told him. Maybe not. But I liked you. I thought you were good for him. I'm sorry it ended the way it did. Now Daniel was here for Ethan's wedding to someone else, and Maya was the hired help making sure everything went perfectly. The irony wasn't lost on her. The storm starting to calm down, Chef Rodriguez observed, looking out the window. We should be able to get back on schedule soon. Maya nodded, but her attention was caught by movement in the hallway. Through the kitchen's service window, she could see Lila talking animatedly to someone on her phone, her free hand gesturing dramatically. No, Mother, everything is fine, Lila was saying, her voice carrying clearly. Yes, there was a little rain, but our planner has everything under control. She's very efficient. The way she said efficient made it sound like a criticism rather than a compliment. Of course the wedding will be perfect, Lila continued. I've made sure of that. Every detail has been planned to perfection, nothing left to chance. Maya frowned. There was something in Lila's tone that bothered her, something calculating. She'd worked with demanding brides before, but this felt different somehow. Maya, Leo appeared at her elbow. Miss Hart is asking for you. She wants to review the indoor setup one more time. Of course she does, Maya thought. But she simply nodded and headed back to the main area. She found Lila standing in the ballroom, studying the space with a critical eye. The indoor ceremony setup was elegant, chairs arranged in neat rows facing the fireplace, where the arch had been repositioned with trailing flowers and soft lighting. It was different from the original outdoor plan, but it was beautiful. I've been thinking, Lila said without preamble. If we do have to use this space, I want to make some adjustments. Of course. What changes would you like? I want the lighting warmer, and maybe we could add some uplighting to make everything more dramatic. Lila pulled out her phone and showed Maya a photo. Something like this, very golden, very romantic. Maya studied the image. It was from another wedding, probably from a magazine or Pinterest board. The lighting was beautiful but would require rental equipment they hadn't budgeted for. That's certainly possible, Maya said carefully, though it would mean additional lighting rentals. I could have quotes for you by morning. Perfect. Money isn't an object. Lila waved a manicured hand dismissively. I want everything to be absolutely perfect, no matter what Mother Nature throws at us. There it was again, that emphasis on perfection, on control. Maya had planned enough weddings to recognize the signs of a bride who was more concerned with the event than the marriage itself. Not that it was her place to judge. Her job was to create the wedding her clients wanted, not to analyze their motivations. I'll get those quotes for you first thing tomorrow, Maya promised. Wonderful. Lila's smile was brilliant, but it didn't reach her eyes. You know, Maya, you're exactly what everyone said you'd be. I hope that's a good thing. Oh, it is. Very professional, very discreet, very contained. Lila tilted her head, studying Maya like she was an interesting specimen. I can see why you're so successful. You don't let personal feelings interfere with business. The comment felt loaded, dangerous. Maya kept her expression neutral. Client satisfaction is my priority. Of course it is. Lila's smile widened. And I'm sure you've had to work with all sorts of challenging situations. Ex-boyfriends at weddings, awkward family dynamics, old relationships that complicate things. Maya's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. Every wedding has its complexities. My job is to navigate them professionally. I'm sure it is. Lila moved closer, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Between you and me, I think it's wonderful how mature you're being about all this. Not everyone would be able to plan their ex-boyfriend's wedding with such grace. There it was. out in the open. Maya met Lila's gaze directly. I plan many weddings, Miss Hart. Each couple deserves my best work, regardless of any personal history. Of course they do. Lila's tone was sweet, but there was steel underneath. I just want to make sure there won't be any complications, any uncomfortable moments that might affect the celebration. There won't be, Maya said firmly. You have my professional guarantee. Perfect. Lila's smile returned to full brightness. I knew I could count on you. After all, you've moved on completely, haven't you? New life, successful career, no looking back? The question felt like a test, but Maya wasn't sure what the right answer was supposed to be. She settled for the truth or part of it. I focus on the present, Miss Hart. And right now, my focus is making sure your wedding is everything you've dreamed of. Wonderful. Lila clapped her hands together. I can see why everyone speaks so highly of you. You really are the consummate professional. As Lila glided away to find Ethan, Maya stood alone in the ballroom, surrounded by the elegant setup she'd created. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to calm, but inside, she felt like she was standing in the eye of a hurricane, because Lila knew. She'd known from the beginning exactly who Maya was, and she'd hired her anyway. The question was why. Maya had a sinking feeling she was about to find out. Friday morning dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. Maya arrived at Seabrook Inn before sunrise, her car loaded with emergency supplies and backup plans she hoped she wouldn't need. The rehearsal was scheduled for 5 o'clock, followed by dinner on the terrace. Tomorrow was the wedding itself. One more day. She just had to get through one more day. The inn was quiet in the early morning light, with only the kitchen staff preparing breakfast for the guests. Maya moved through the spaces methodically, checking details, adjusting flowers that had been disturbed by the storm, making sure everything was perfect. She was arranging programs on the gift table when she heard footsteps behind her. You're here early. Maya didn't turn around. She recognized Ethan's voice, though it was softer than usual, more hesitant. I like to get a head start on rehearsal days. Make sure there are no surprises. Smart. He moved into her peripheral vision, hands in his pockets. He was wearing jeans and a simple blue shirt that made his eyes look darker. Can I help with anything? I have everything under control, thank you. It was the same response she'd given him all week, polite but distant. Professional armor that kept her safe from conversations she wasn't ready to have. But Ethan didn't leave this time. Instead, he picked up one of the programs and studied it. Maya had designed them herself, elegant script on cream cardstock, tied with silk ribbon that matched the flower arrangements. These are beautiful, he said quietly. You always had an eye for detail. Maya's hands stilled on the ribbon she was adjusting. Mr. Vale. Ethan, he corrected gently. Please, we've known each other too long for such formality, have we? The words slipped out before she could stop them, sharper than she'd intended. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. I know I have no right to ask this, but could we talk? Just for a few minutes, please. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. She'd been doing fine all week, keeping her walls up, staying focused on work. Talking to Ethan, really talking, felt dangerous, like opening a door she'd spent 4 years learning to keep locked. But something in his voice, the careful way he'd said, please, made her pause. 5 minutes, she said, not looking at him. In the office, with the door open. Relief flickered across his features. Thank you. Carmen's office was small and cluttered with wedding binders and vendor contracts. Maya sat behind the desk, putting the physical barrier between them. Ethan took the chair across from her, but he looked uncomfortable, like he wasn't sure how to begin. The storm yesterday, he said finally. You handled it perfectly. You always were good in a crisis. Is that what you wanted to talk about? My crisis management skills? No. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Maya remembered from their college days when he was nervous or trying to work through a difficult problem. I wanted to apologize for everything, for how things ended between us, for the situation this week, don't. Maya's voice was firm. Don't apologize to me on the day before your wedding to someone else. That's not fair to anyone. You're right. He looked down at his hands. You're absolutely right. But Maya, I need you to know that what happened between us, the way I hurt you, it was the biggest mistake of my life." The words hung in the small office like a weight. Maya felt something crack inside her chest, a carefully maintained wall developing its first fissure. "Why?" she asked quietly. "Why did you do it?" It was the question she'd never gotten a real answer to. Oh, Ethan had said all the right things 4 years ago. He was sorry. It was a mistake. He didn't know what he was thinking. But he'd never told her why. Why Jessica? Why the lies? Why he'd thrown away what they'd had for something that didn't mean anything. Ethan was quiet for so long Maya thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw. "Because I was scared." "Scared of what?" "Of you. Of us. Of how much you meant to me." He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time since they'd sat down. "You were so sure about everything, Maya. About us. About the future. You talked about what we'd do after graduation, where we'd live, how we'd make it work. And I wanted all of that, but I was terrified I wasn't good enough for it." Maya frowned. "That doesn't explain why you cheated." "No, it doesn't." Ethan's voice was heavy with shame. "Jessica was. Easier. She didn't expect anything from me. She didn't believe in me the way you did. With her, I could just be the screwed-up kid from the rich family who couldn't live up to expectations. But with you," he stopped, swallowed hard. "With you, I felt like I had to be better, like I had to deserve you. And I was so afraid of disappointing you that I sabotaged everything instead." Maya stared at him, processing his words. It was an explanation, at least. Not an excuse. Nothing could excuse the months of lies, the casual betrayal of her trust, but an explanation. "So you hurt me before I could hurt you," she said slowly. "I hurt you because I was a coward." Ethan's voice was flat. "Because I was 22 years old and stupid, and I thought it was better to be the bad guy than to risk being inadequate." The honesty in his voice surprised her. The Ethan she'd known in college had trouble admitting weakness, admitting fear. This older version seemed to have learned something about himself in the intervening years. "I went to therapy," he continued, as if reading her thoughts. "After we broke up. It took me 2 years to even understand what I'd done, why I'd done it. By then, you were gone. You'd moved away, started fresh. I told myself you were better off without me." Maya's throat felt tight. "I was. I know." The simple acceptance in his voice caught her off guard. "I know you were. You built something beautiful here, Maya. Your business, your reputation, you should be proud of what you've accomplished." "I am." The words came out stronger than she felt. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 4 years and 1,000 unspoken words filling the space between them. "Your 5 minutes are up," Maya said finally. Ethan nodded and started to rise, then paused. "Maya, for what it's worth, I hope you find someone who deserves you. Someone who's brave enough to love you the way you deserve to be loved." After he left, Maya sat alone in the office, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to process what had just happened. The apology she'd waited 4 years to hear had finally come, but it felt like too little, too late, or maybe too much, too close to his wedding day. She forced herself to focus on the schedule ahead. Rehearsal at 5, dinner at 6:30, early bedtime for everyone. Tomorrow was the main event, and then this would all be over. She could go back to her normal life, to planning weddings for couples who didn't carry the weight of her personal history. But as she headed back to the main area to continue setup, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The careful, professional distance she'd maintained all week felt thinner now, more fragile, and that scared her more than she wanted to admit. The rehearsal began on schedule despite a light drizzle that required moving the ceremony indoors. Maya directed the wedding party through their entrances and exits, adjusted spacing and timing, and handled the small crises that always arose: a bridesmaid's broken heel, confusion about which groomsman walked with which bridesmaid, Lila's last-minute decision to change the order of the readings. Through it all, Maya was aware of Ethan watching her. Not obviously, not in a way that anyone else would notice, but she could feel his attention like a physical weight. When she caught his eye accidentally, he looked away quickly, but not before she saw something there that made her chest tighten. "Beautiful job, as always," Daniel said quietly as they finished the final run-through. "Everything's going to be perfect tomorrow. Thank you." Maya was adjusting the Unity candle placement, grateful for the distraction. "Your brother seems nervous." It wasn't really a question, but Daniel answered anyway. Wedding nerves, I think. Big day, lots of pressure. Maya nodded, but she wondered if it was more than that. She'd seen plenty of nervous grooms, and Ethan didn't look nervous. He looked conflicted. The rehearsal dinner was held on the covered terrace, with heaters and market lights creating a warm, intimate atmosphere, despite the cool evening air. Maya oversaw the service, making sure courses came out on time and glasses stayed filled. She tried to stay in the background, but it was impossible to avoid hearing conversations at the head table. To Ethan and Lila, Vivian Vale was saying, raising her champagne glass. May your marriage be everything you both hope for. There was something careful in Ethan's mother's tone, something that suggested she was choosing her words deliberately. Maya had always liked Vivian. She was smart and kind, if sometimes overly concerned with appearances. Thank you, Mom. Ethan lifted his own glass, but Maya noticed he barely sipped from it. Speech from the best man, someone called out, and Daniel stood with good-natured resignation. I've known my little brother his whole life, Daniel began, getting a few chuckles from the gathered family and friends. And I've watched him grow from a kid who was afraid of his own shadow into a man who's still afraid of his own shadow sometimes, but who's learned to face his fears anyway. Maya glanced up from her clipboard, surprised by the pointed nature of Daniel's words. She caught sight of Ethan's face. He looked uncomfortable, like he was getting a message he didn't want to hear. The best relationships, Daniel continued, are the ones where both people make each other braver, where they help each other become the people they're meant to be. I hope Ethan and Lila find that kind of courage together. It was a lovely sentiment, but something about the way Daniel said it made Maya wonder if he was speaking more to his brother than to the gathered guests. After dinner, as the evening wound down and guests began to drift back to their rooms, Maya was clearing the last of the dessert plates when she overheard Lila talking to one of her bridesmaids. Everything has to be perfect tomorrow, Lila was saying, her voice slightly slurred from champagne. Every detail, every photo. I've worked too hard for this to let anything go wrong. It's going to be beautiful, the bridesmaid assured her. Maya has everything under control. Yes, she does. There was an odd note in Lila's voice. Very under control, very professional, even under challenging circumstances. The bridesmaid looked confused, but Maya understood. Lila was still testing boundaries, still making sure Maya knew her place. As if summoned by the conversation, Lila appeared at Maya's elbow. Maya, there you are. I wanted to thank you for handling the weather change so gracefully. Not everyone would have been so adaptable. It's my job, Maya replied simply. Of course it is. And you do it so well. Lila's smile was bright, but her eyes were calculating. I imagine you've learned to adapt to all sorts of situations in your line of work. Unexpected complications, difficult personalities, awkward histories. Maya set down the plates she was holding and faced Lila directly. Miss Hart, if there's something specific you'd like to discuss. Oh, nothing specific, Lila laughed, the sound like breaking crystal. I'm just impressed by your professionalism. Not everyone could plan their ex-boyfriend's wedding with such grace. The words carried clearly in the quiet evening air. Several nearby guests turned to look, curiosity sparked by Lila's tone. Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she kept her voice steady. If you'll excuse me, I need to coordinate with the night staff about tomorrow's setup. She turned to walk away, but Lila's voice followed her. Of course, dear. Sweet dreams. Big day tomorrow. As Maya headed toward the inn, she could feel eyes on her back guests whispering, putting pieces together, creating stories. This was exactly what she'd hoped to avoid. Her professional reputation depended on discretion, on staying above the fray of personal drama, but Lila seemed determined to drag her into the spotlight. Maya was checking locks and turning off lights when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting to see Carmen or one of the staff, but found Ethan instead. Maya, I'm sorry about what Lila said out there. That was inappropriate. It's fine. Maya's voice was clipped. Your fiancé was just having a little fun. It's not fine, and it's not fun. She was deliberately trying to embarrass you. Maya studied his face in the dim hallway lighting. Why do you think she hired me, Ethan? The question seemed to catch him off guard. What do you mean? She knew exactly who I was when she requested me specifically. She's been making pointed comments all week. Tonight was just the most obvious example. Maya crossed her arms. So I'll ask again, why do you think she hired me? Ethan was quiet for a long moment, and Maya could see him working through the implications. I don't know, he said finally. I think you do. Maya, she hired me to prove something. To you, to me, to herself, maybe all three. Maya's voice was steady, but inside she felt shaky. The question is, what you're going to do about it. Ethan started, then stopped. What do you want me to do? It was the wrong question, and they both knew it. What Maya wanted wasn't the issue. What was right, what was fair, what was honest, those were the real questions. I want you to figure out what kind of man you want to be, Maya said quietly, and then be that man, whatever the cost. She walked away before he could respond, leaving Ethan alone in the hallway with the weight of her words and the choices that lay ahead. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow, all of this would be over. But tonight, for the first time in 4 years, Maya let herself wonder what might happen if Ethan finally found the courage he'd been lacking all those years ago. Even if it was too late for them, maybe it wasn't too late for him to do the right thing, whatever that might be.